If we know the causes of boardroom disputes, very often they can be avoided and certainly mitigated. But first, let's define what we mean by the term the boardroom. Well, typically that is directors and shareholders, but also includes partners for unincorporated businesses. And this might come as a bit as a surprise for some people, but senior management who may frequent board meetings or have aspirations, legitimate or otherwise, to be in the boardroom. So let's look at directors. So the question might arise as, why is this person a director? Why were they made a director? Why are they still a director? Is the dead wood? What are they contributing? There could be feelings of resentment, inequality, maybe an absentee director drawing too much salary compared to working directors. Let's look at the history. Has this been building up or festering for a number of years? Because the key here is, if they are directors and most of them feel that one of them is a problem, it needs to be addressed rather than having the can kicked down the road and hoping that it sorts itself out naturally. It might well do, but on the other hand, it can take on a direction of its own if it bursts onto the scene and the discord just runs and runs and runs thereafter. What about shareholders? What do they fall out over? Well, shareholders amongst themselves might have a dispute over the valuation of a share when one of them wishes to sell, perhaps the rights attached to buy the shares of a selling shareholder. Minorities might feel they're being taken advantage of. All too often, there is no shareholder agreement. Many have never even heard of it. There is a common belief, mistaken unfortunately, that the company articles will suffice to determine the relationship between shareholders. They don't. I personally believe that this situation has been made worse since the adoption of model articles in recent years, as many people just default to it rather than, paying attention and using something which has been drawn up by a company formation agent or a solicitor. But a shareholder agreement is important because it's like an insurance policy in some ways. You're paying for it. If you don't need to use it, you don't need to use it. But if you are going to draw up, do it properly and go to a solicitor who knows what he or she is talking about. Strategy and direction are an issue where the shareholders and the directors together lock horns, or between the directors themselves. Remember, in a small business, in most SMEs, the directors are often the shareholders. If you've got an issue about strategy of the company or the direction it is taking or it needs to take, you need to have full, frank, and open debate. And if there is disagreement, it needs to be had out in the open and validated, and if necessary, a third party brought in. Changing relationships can create stress. Job roles and responsibilities. Is this someone's job? Is a mission creep? Are they stepping into someone else's job? And if they are, is there someone else not doing their job? We've got automation coming along. Perhaps as one of the directors has been very busy on the paperwork side of the business, and that side of it doesn't really require his or her input. What's going to happen to them? We've got home working, changing in travel and meeting patterns, which can create stresses. You've got boundaries blurring between family, friends, and the workplace. Very often, the family and the friends in a small company, there'll be a blurred relationship between it, and if there is a breakdown externally, it can impinge on the boardroom. And conversely, in the boardroom, if there's a problem, it can impact upon relationships out of the boardroom. Inequality. This is another common reason. Inequality, whether it's perceived or actual, it needs to be dealt with. Now, some of the directors might not realize they might be bullying another one. What is bullying to one person is banter to another, especially if there is a generational difference in attitude. Is it office politics, run-of-the-mill stuff, or is there something else under the surface? Remuneration, why is this one getting more than me? Why is this one's terms and conditions different to mine? Who's working more, who's working less? As retirement comes, people want to work less once they have retired. What happens to their director's salary? Management, senior managers may often feel they deserve shares in the company or a seat on the board. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Maybe they're demanding too much, perhaps out of greed, or perhaps it's a lack of understanding. Maybe they think they've got a skill which they don't actually have. This needs tackled, because if you've got a good manager who's good as a manager, but you believe they can't really rise any higher, you don't want them leaving the company. By the same token, you don't want them in the boardroom. Again, it may require an outsider to come in here. And sleeping partners, from the outset, someone puts in the money and there's an arrangement which works, but it comes to a point where they feel they need to work or they want to work in the business, and everything needs to be looked at again. How are we going to deal with this? So the important thing to remember is not to ignore a problem. If you pick it up, detect it. If you think there's something going on, talk to people early, and to understand what the options are. Rather than rushing into things, or perhaps making your own mind up, talk to somebody else. And if you can't get agreement amongst yourselves and it gets out of control or it looks like it's heading that way, remember, if you end up going to law, and it could be your counterparty will initiate proceedings, which is out of your control, you've got costs which are open-ended, you've got untold stress, damage to the business, damage to relationships, and you may not even solve the root problem because you are risking an imposed settlement. It's out of your hands and it could run and run and run. Remember, the legal mind is based around going to court, doing battle. Mediation is your alternative. It's fast, it's cost effective, and there is no risk because you're not signing anything until everything is agreed. As the saying goes, nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. It will actually examine the root causes and have a chance well over 80% of solving the problem. It's completely different to a legal adversarial approach.